Okay, so needless to say, the current economic system isn't really working for most of us. So I showed this earlier, the division between what's happening. Russell says it's good. Okay, cool. Sweet. Yeah, so just this idea that CEOs now make 272 times more than their workers, and that's gotten exponentially worse over the past several decades. Housing is crazy. Inflation in the last, year and a half or something, things have just completely transformed, and buying groceries is crazy expensive now. And yeah, so we can see it's not working for most people. And I would even argue that the people that seem to be benefiting the most from late stage capitalism tend to not be happy, and I think are disconnected from their fellow humans in a lot of ways. So I think you can make the case that it's not really serving anybody, even the people that it seems to most benefit. So the old system, in my view, creates this needless binary between for-profit and nonprofit organizations. Nonprofits wouldn't have to exist if capitalism wasn't, by definition, solely focused on making profits. And never the twain shall meet. So it becomes this weird situation in which this idea of building abundance yourself and helping others is totally separate. And it's been interesting to see that sort of within the work that we're doing at Seeds, because we work to transcend that division. It's often difficult for people to sort of wrap their brains around that, because we're all so conditioned to think that it's impossible. You make your money over here, and then maybe you make donations to a charity over here, and they're very separate things. And that's a conditioning that capitalism leaves us with. I think that late stage capitalism also broadcasts the idea that competition leads to choice for the consumer. And to an extent that's true. And historically, I think that was more true. But at this stage in history, I'd say that the reality is that, a handful of giant corporations make most of what we use throughout the experience of living your daily life in the modern world. And it's crazy. And so this is the slide I think I was left on before. There's this book that I find interesting if anyone wants to check it out. It's called The Myth of Capitalism. It was published, I think, 2018. And the idea here is that we've gone from this sort of open, more competitive marketplace that was more localized to this situation, particularly in the tech sector, but also in terms of stuff like food. There are a handful of very powerful companies who dominate the entire sector, and these are things that we've become dependent on, these tools that we think we need to use every day, and they've helped us evolve to this point in terms of societal development. But it's for companies, right? And so yeah, what I was starting to say before when the sound was messed up was that I found it interesting with what's going on with X, formerly known as Twitter. Since Elon doesn't know, it's so funny that it's being revealed that he doesn't understand anything. But it was interesting to see that whenever people were first oh, I don't want to be on this platform anymore now that it's X, it was there were a couple people in the world who could create an alternative to Twitter quickly. And one of them was Mark Zuckerberg. So he created Threads, which a lot of people moved to, but then they didn't really use. And that, I feel that just illustrates the problem. If you like something like Twitter and something weird like this happens, there's nowhere else to go, really. I mean, nothing else that is like Twitter to that extent, except for Threads, which can only be made by a couple people. So it's just illustrating this problem. And this wasn't the case, decades ago. It's really sort of consolidated over the last bunch of years. So the so-called father of capitalism, Adam Smith, as many of you may know, published The Wealth of Nations in 1776, which was the same year the Declaration of Independence was signed in the US. For my astrology heads, I find this interesting because this means that both the United States and capitalism's founding ideas are currently going through their Pluto return. I think Rome fell during its second Pluto return. So it's just interesting to see, even if you don't believe in these sorts of things, I find that the energies certainly are pushing toward showing us what's not working in those sectors. Yeah. This is a quote from Adam Smith from The Wealth of Nations. He says, it's one of his more famous quotes, "It's not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest." Kimberly's patterns. Yeah, totally. That's what I see astrology as being. And it's interesting to look at that and watch that develop over time. But yeah, so this is the Adam Smith quote. What's funny about this is that Adam Smith, maybe you're aware of this as well, but for those who aren't, he wrote these words while living with his mom, which he did for the majority of his adult life, for the majority of his life, rather, because he lived with her when he was a kid as well. And so there's another book that may be of interest called Who Cooked Adam Smith's Dinner by this Swedish economist, Katrine Marcel. And Vincent's like the fourth turning. Yeah, I was just watching a YouTube video the other day where somebody was summarizing that concept. It's happening. But yeah, Smith coined this term, the invisible hand, which we've heard. If you've taken an economics class, I'm sure you've come across that concept. And I think this quote is funny because it's like, but it turns out the real invisible hand may have been the one that put the dinner on his table every night, though he claims that nobody does that except in their own self-interest, for his entire life, which was his mother, whose efforts and labor were uncounted in his equations and went uncompensated. So this entire, it's just really funny, I think. Like, he lives with his mom forever. She's caring for him. We can presume that she probably wasn't caring for her child like solely in her own self-interest, which is a whole other philosophical conversation, but just like, this is the guy that created the system that we still live in 200, whatever, 40 something years later. And like, this wasn't even accounted for, even though he was experiencing this feminine sort of care in his daily life. It was invisible to him. It wasn't something that he understood to value enough to factor into these like world-changing concepts that still shape our life today, which is nuts. So I would say, in my view, that society tends to overvalue often unhealthy masculine energies. So this idea of productivity at all costs, which I think we're totally seeing breaking down, and COVID kind of helped us along in that sense and making that, like, revealing the cracks in that way of thinking. This idea of like strength defined solely as brute force, when strength can also mean attracting and manifesting and drawing things to yourselves. And the society that we're living in undervalues feminine energies like receptivity and nurturing and creativity and cooperation, childcare. Like, we see it playing out in the way that teachers are paid terrible salaries compared to other sectors. I think it's, when you start paying attention to it, it's rampant. I find that I see it virtually everywhere. And to be clear, I want to say that I believe that yin and yang, so feminine and masculine energies, reside in humans of all genders. We all have them. And therefore, these things show up in the systems that we create. But because of the societal emphasis on over prioritizing masculine energies, it's a root cause, I think, of many of the world's current challenges, because that shows up in the systems that humans create as well. And I think all of us have internalized this to some degree or another, because we all like live in this society and interact with it. And it's just what we've been taught. It's like the water and we're the fish. So thanks to Adam Smith's limitations and a paucity of alternatives, our economic ecosystem is skewed in the same way. And I think it's pretty clear that it can't sustain. So I became sure over time and through iterating and trying things with seeds that there had to be a better way. So introducing seeds, if you're unfamiliar with our project, a little bit more about my background. So if you've ever seen the Silicon Valley, the HBO show Silicon Valley, this was like a promo from the show, I think from the first season, which was years ago now. This is a shot of the main character, Richard, who founded a startup competing in something called TechCrunch Disrupt Battlefield in San Francisco. And this is me in the real life version of that competition. This is in December of 2016 on behalf of Seeds. So the point is that I've been around that sector for a while. It's messed up. It's not working either for, I think, the same reasons, or certainly that's a big part of why it's not working. And before founding Seeds, I was a career profitable stock, treasury futures, and Eurodollar futures trader. And the misogyny there eventually drove me to quit. But it was also that the systemic discrimination that I experienced personally in my own lived experience made me realize that the old economic system was going to fail. Like, it couldn't sustain. But I didn't know what that was going to look like. And it took many years of sort of tweaking things to kind of get a sense of what seemed to be a better solution that was actually practical, that we could actually use. I discovered cryptocurrency and I made exponentially larger profits when I started trading it as compared to what I did in the stock market when I began trading it in 2013. So it's been like almost 10 years now since I bought my first it was like part of a Bitcoin, which was virtually all that was available in 2013. So yeah, it's been a bit. What was exciting there to me was being able to see that crypto's decentralized design it opened up all of these possibilities, because the old system is about centralized design and centralized control of money, centralized generation of money. But whenever we had these sort of decentralized options, these trustless systems that were being made available, there were all of these pockets of possibility that were suddenly accessible to us that hadn't been there before. You may have heard me share this quote before. It's a quote that I like a lot. So Buckminster Fuller was this futurist who lived in the States in the 20th century. Something he shared was this idea that you can never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. So that's what we're working to do through Seeds. So we continue to try and tweak and improve it over time through actually working with people who are using the ecosystem. I struggle with this concept a lot as like somebody who thinks of myself as an activist who is often angry and sad about the state of things in the world. So I try to shift into this idea as much as possible, that instead of putting my energy into trying to like fight the system or getting really sad about the system, if I'm channeling it over here into something that's about generating a system, growing an ecosystem, Seeds, which I believe is better, that I think is more helpful for all of us. So I think this is such a difficult lesson to learn, especially in the current climate. It's not an idea that I see discussed a lot. And yeah, so I want to get it out there more. And I try to remind myself of it as much as possible too. So for anyone who isn't aware of what crypto is, let's talk about like the actual definition of cryptocurrency. So to varying degrees, and this is important, depending on the project, it's sort of a spectrum between decentralization and centralization. It could generally be said that cryptocurrency is a decentralized means of generating, creating, and transacting money. In contrast to that, fiat currency, like for example, the US dollar or the GBP or the AUD or the SSD, I know Mayam's here, the South Sudanese pound, whatever your fiat currency is, that currency, as we know, is created and in many ways controlled by a centralized entity, which is the government of the country that is generating that. And so, I mean, this, I think, suggests all kinds of other like philosophical topics that are of interest to me, like the idea of nation states at all. Like, should we continue to even have nation states? I wonder if that's going to disappear in our lifetimes. But yeah, it's these countries, obviously, that generate the currency. And then they have supposedly independent, to varying degrees, independent institutions that are generating the monetary policy to sort of like govern those currencies. But yeah, it's the governments that do it, and they're centralized. Unlike cryptocurrency, and this is really important to understand, the US dollar, for example, which is like the most commonly used currency in the world, is backed by nothing except our collective trust in the government, because we haven't been on the gold standard since like, I think the 1970s. So whenever people, sometimes when learning about cryptocurrency, people will be like, but like, why does it have value? Like, what's behind it? And that's a valid question, of course, but that question could also be asked of the US dollar, because there's literally nothing backing it and hasn't been for 50 plus years, except the fact that we trust it. So that's the thing about trust. These systems work because there's a certain amount of trust. Good quality decentralized ecosystems work to define themselves as trustless, so that it isn't necessary to trust them, because the system itself is functional in a certain way that means you don't have to trust those third parties. So I've shared this before. It's a post on Reddit. I think it was in like the cryptocurrency sub. It's a fairly old post at this point. And it's somebody who's saying like, I work at McDonald's and we have these little cards that we give to customers when we fuck up their order that lets them redeem the card for a free Big Mac. And just recently we're shifting to using these coins for Big Macs instead of the cards. This person's like, I'm far from an economics expert, but since our money has no value anymore because it's not backed by the gold standard, Whereas these coins from McDonald's are backed by Big Macs. Does that make them a more stable currency than our own money? And like, it kind of does. So it just illustrates the point that like McDonald's is creating this currency backed by Big Macs, and it has value in that like you can eat a Big Mac. Food has inherent value to human beings and to any being that needs to eat food to survive, right? So that brings in an entirely other discussion we could have about what the concept of value is. And that's something we cover in the cryptocurrency and how to trade it course as well. But largely value is subjective and made up, and it's about a series of agreements that people have with one another that like, yeah, this does have value and this is what the value is and so forth. So I really want to encourage everyone to consider and reflect on who made those decisions and whether or not they still make sense for us today, if they make sense for you as an individual today. And I feel like this is kind of a funny example to like illustrate that. It's also helpful to recognize that banks are centralized too, as are governments. Governments, you could argue, like some are certainly more centralized than others. Democratic governments are the least centralized current form of governing system, I think you could say. Banks are centralized though. And they, for anyone who's not aware, banks get rich off of us because they reinvest our deposits in other assets. So they'll take, the $1,000 that you deposit in your checking account or whatever, they'll reinvest that elsewhere, make whatever, a 15% return, and then they'll pay you the like half a percentage point or whatever shitty return that they're giving now. And that's how banks make money. They make it on our backs. And it's just been appealing to people, over the years because it was just a convenient, easy way for us to get at least a little bit of a return. Even if we didn't, without having to do research or like look into how to invest in certain assets or whatever. That system is problematic for several reasons. But another important piece of it to understand is that centralized banks, employ this practice called fractional reserve banking. And what that means is that if people showed up at the bank, if every person who had money at a bank showed up at the same time, the bank wouldn't be able to give everybody their deposits back because they only have a fraction of those reserves available for withdrawal at any given time because they're investing our money in other asset classes where they're making a lot more money than they're paying us. So that, I'll talk more about how that's gone horribly awry historically. I also want to mention that this is a fairly new development. I think Trump passed this in like March of 2020 or something, and to my knowledge, it's still in effect. But the other thing that's really messed up about this is like, and I can talk about this from my personal experience as a non-male founder of a tech thing, because now US banks can invest our deposits as consumers into like statistically racist and misogynistic asset classes like venture capital. And they can do that without our knowledge or consent. So they can take our money and use it to continue to like perpetuate these inequities within the old financial system. And we wouldn't even know. They can just do that. And it's crazy and it's messed up. I think I didn't pull the stats for this particular webcast. Sometimes I have done that in the past, but I believe last year, like less than 2% of all venture capital funding went to women who founded tech things. And it's like, it's getting worse over time. It's not good. In contrast to that, DeFi or decentralized finance platforms actually allow us to retain custody of our funds while we use them, and therefore control of our money, even as we earn returns on that money. So it's like the best of both worlds. So Uniswap, many of you are familiar with, and I know you've used. It's sort of I would say it's still the like the leading decentralized platform. I think they just got sued recently though as well. We're kind of going through this stage in the cryptocurrency cycle in which there are more lawsuits and more of the bad stuff is clearing out and so forth. But I mean they're going to set some sort of legal precedent because they're a decentralized platform and anyone can use the platform to put on any Ethereum-based cryptocurrency that they'd like to trade on the platform. And Uniswap they don't police that. And I mean, you can argue that maybe someone should, But the thing about decentralized platforms is that they just exist as tools and you can use them. And there isn't, again, this third party that you have to trust in order to take care of the transaction as you would if you're using a bank or another centralized entity. Banks are also custodial, as I mentioned briefly before, so they hold custody of our funds. As we know, if we give them our money is at the bank, and then we actually have to effectively ask their permission to move our money. They'll charge crazy wire fees that are often if you're paying a $30 wire fee in the US, they use the FedWire system, as I understand, and it costs 70 cents for what they're charging us $30 for. So there's just exploitation going on in a lot of different ways. Thankfully, we're getting away from that. Less banks have wire fees now and stuff, but it's just they've abused their power for a long time. This isn't so terrible necessarily when we can trust the bank, the centralized custodial entity, but historically, when that trust is broken down, when fractional reserve banking has failed and the bank retaining custody of consumer deposits has failed, that significantly contributed to the Great Depression, without a doubt. So this is a shot I've shared before of a bank run at a bank in San Antonio in 1931. So, what would happen is you'd hear from your neighbor or your friend that the bank was in trouble, right? So then everybody would go down to the bank at the same time wanting their deposits back because they were afraid the bank was going to go under. But because of fractional reserve banking, the bank only had a fraction of total deposits available for withdrawal. And so then the banks would fold because they just couldn't give everybody back their deposits at the same time. So this would make the collapse happen more quickly. If you've ever seen It's a Wonderful Life and you remember this scene when George is trying to talk to his friends and neighbors to say we don't have all of your money here available for withdrawal at the same time. And so he's talking to this lady and this lady says that, oh, maybe she only needs, a few dollars of what her deposit is. I forget how much it was. And that's what turns the tide. And suddenly his friends stop freaking out and the building and loan doesn't go under because it's no longer a bank run. They're only taking out a small portion of their total deposits, which saves the building and loan because they don't have everything available because of fractional reserve banking. So yeah, it can be a huge problem. Those collapses during the Great Depression led to the formation of the FDIC in the US, which insures bank deposits, currently up to $250,000 in total. So that's a solution, but it's also meant that a centralized entity of sometimes dubious trustworthiness, aka banks, was then insured by arguably another one, the government, depending on how you feel about that. So that's fundamental to how the banking system works. Something that's really kind of bugged me because I haven't seen this in mainstream media much at all. I can't even think of a single article I've seen about this. So in the recent months of terrible cryptocurrency news, nobody is talking about that. I have found this idea that the same principles that led to the Great Depression that don't work for banks, that don't work for centralization, that's the reason these recent cryptocurrency projects, almost without exception, have failed as well. It's the same thing, but instead, for whatever reason, the media is casting cryptocurrency as a thing as evil and bad. It's so extreme that I recently built a tiny house from a kit on land I own in Western Massachusetts, and it was me and this local carpenter. And I offered to pay him in cryptocurrency at one point. And I'd been talking about it as we were working together. And he was so freaked out. And I could tell that he immediately started trusting me less as a human being because I'd simply used the word cryptocurrency. So it was pretty crazy. It's just and this was a local carpenter in Western Mass who he lives in the woods. It's reached that extent of mainstream awareness and skepticism, or even a stronger word than skepticism. He was freaked out. He was super mistrusting because I used the word crypto. So it's just interesting. It hasn't been that strong or that bad in past cycles that I've seen when we've gone through this shift from optimism to skepticism, which has happened. I've seen this is the fourth cycle, I guess, that I've seen since I started trading 10 years ago. So yeah, these failed crypto projects acted like bad centralized banks without the FDIC to back them up. These are some of the many failures that we've seen in recent months. Sam Bankman-Fried is in jail. recently. I think he just got sent there a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. And this was especially crazy, right? Like maybe some of y'all saw, there were like FTX, like fancy FTX ads with like Giselle, like, I mean, in mid 2022, I think. And then this huge shift happened and this guy's in jail. And it's because it's literally the exact same thing. They handled things poorly in terms of fractional reserves. They were investing money, consumer deposits somewhere else. A bunch of people wanted to withdraw their money and it wasn't there. And so they failed. And he was doing fraudulent things he shouldn't have been as well, which is why he's in jail. But like, it's the same principle is the point that I'm trying to make. As like contrary to that, actual good quality DeFi ecosystems are trustless, as I mentioned, so we don't have to worry about Sam Bankman-Fried like reinvesting our money somewhere else so we can't get it back. We don't have to deal with that, which is why DeFi, in my view, is so preferable in so many ways. Centralization failures point to why self-custody is so important. So this is one of the most important pieces of information I can impart to people that are newer to the sector. Like, legit, as much as possible, try and make sure your cryptocurrency is stored in a self-custody wallet. Self-custody, okay? How do you know if your wallet's self-custody? You can be certain it's self-custody if you have exclusive access to the private key for the wallet and or the mnemonic for the wallet. Sometimes they'll have a mnemonic instead of a key. And you know that no one else has access to that information. Then you know it's self-custody. Of course, then you have to take care of that. You have to make sure that's saved in a safe place. You don't have the benefit of, like a third party being able to help you if you lose your key or something like that. So there's an added layer of responsibility, but I mean, in my opinion, it just so vastly outweighs the potential negatives that it's just the way to go. It's also helpful to understand that your self-custody wallet just exists on the blockchain. So it's like if you're using MetaMask, for example, which is a self-custody wallet, your money isn't being held by MetaMask. MetaMask is allowing you to like move your money on the blockchain as you choose. When you have that mnemonic or private key to access your wallet, you can use it to access those funds from a wide variety of DeFi tools. It's not just on MetaMask or on Coinbase's self-custody wallet or whatever it might be. So that's very different from, like what it is if you make a deposit at like Bank of America or something like that, in which case Bank of America literally has your shit. That said, I mean, to be fair, good quality centralized crypto exchanges and banks, I would say, I still use the US dollar to live my life. I still use currencies that are generated by governments myself. Good quality centralized crypto exchanges serve a necessary purpose at this point in history, which is simply that they allow us to buy cryptocurrency with fiat currency. Otherwise, we'd have to exclusively trade cryptocurrencies for cryptocurrencies. And like, how do you generate them in the first place? How do you get access to them unless you're mining? And that's a whole other thing. Mining can be problematic, often is problematic. So centralized crypto exchanges serve this purpose for us. But it's also important to understand that when we use centralized exchanges and we pay fees, the fees go to the people who own those centralized exchanges. So the example I always use is the Winklevi. If you've ever seen The Social Network, these are the real life dudes who were played by Armie Hammer in that movie, who sued Zuckerberg, claiming that he stole the idea for Facebook when they were all at Harvard. These dudes are like their dad is like a hedge fund manager, I think, who was already worth like $100 million. They took a portion of the funds that they got from suing Facebook and they put it into Bitcoin in 2013. So this is an old article. It's from December of 2017, which was like the last cryptocurrency cycle high. They were already billionaires at that time. So they have an exchange called Gemini, which I use because I think it's like the least worst, although it's still awful. There's no like great centralized cryptocurrency exchange that I found. And I've looked. So the point is just that when we're using a centralized exchange like Gemini to buy cryptocurrency with the US dollar or the GBP or whatever, that the fees that we're paying are going to the Winklevi to make them even richer, effectively. They're going to the exchange. But when we use DeFi tools like Uniswap, which I shared earlier, we're acting as a bank for each other through something called staking. And so we earn those fees instead. They're not going to like a couple of rich people behind the platform. They're going to the people who created the pool on the decentralized, within the decentralized tool. So that's, I think, really, really fucking cool. Like, we get to generate those fees ourselves. We also retain custody of our funds ourselves. As I mentioned, we can remove them from the pool at any time because we have a self-custody wallet that we can, you can just plug in the key or the mnemonic. So it's a very different thing. We're not enriching people that are already rich in the way that we would be if we're paying the Winklevi money. It doesn't mean that rich people don't stake in decentralized pools. They certainly do, but I think it's a lot more democratic. So in DeFi, on platforms like Uniswap, you can trade cryptocurrencies. You can do what I mentioned earlier, this concept of staking, in which you're essentially putting your liquidity up so that people can use it to trade, and those fees they're paying go to you instead. That can generate a passive income for you. And again, you can do all this without having to rely on a trusted third party like a centralized exchange. You know, though, if it's actually a DeFi platform, if it's a true DeFi platform, especially because there have been so many more scams and phishing attempts in maybe the last year or so. The reason you know is if you can connect your self-custody wallet to the platform in order to use it. But you need to make sure it's truly the platform you intend to use. There have been the most prevalent scam I've seen, and again, like probably the last year, have been phishing scams. Sometimes you'll see them on Twitter. Hey, Willie, what's up? Nice to see you. Sometimes people on Twitter will pose as like a decentralized exchange like Uniswap and say like if people tweet about problems they're having, you'll sometimes see these really fast responses from some fake Twitter handle that looks like it's Uniswap, but it's not. And they'll link to something. They'll say like, submit your support request here. And when you click that link, you're actually going to a fake site that is going to access your key or your mnemonic if you connect your wallet to it. So it's so important to make sure you're only connecting your wallet to DeFi tools that you're certain you can trust. This has been, like I said, this has been the most prevalent scam that I've seen in the last year. And scams are always evolving, but at the end of the day, yeah, just making sure that you're only connecting to stuff you want to use is like Crypto 101. So this is a screenshot of the Uniswap platform. You can see on the right here that it says Connect Wallet at the top. So that tells you that it's a decentralized platform, and you want to make sure you're going to the correct URL so that you know that it's Uniswap or Zerion or 1inch or whatever platform you might be using. So it's a good idea to bookmark the URL for the website if you're certain it's the correct website, because that way you're not going to accidentally get redirected to someplace you don't want to be. Hopefully, when you revisit the site in the future. So yeah, when you're clicking on Connect a Wallet on Uniswap's platform, it'll give you various options. These are all self-custody wallets. So MetaMask is one here that I mentioned that I use fairly frequently. So that's DeFi. DeFi is helping us get away from that centralized control, and it's safer and it's a lot more autonomous and allows us to build wealth ourselves. I think that Seeds expands upon what DeFi offers, and that Seeds is a decentralized project, although we moderate it, which I think is important. That's like a thing, a philosophical idea I think that's coming up more as we're seeing the prevalence of AI, is that we still need humans to moderate a lot of these tools because there are limitations to what the tech can do. Humans are just better at a lot of stuff. So I'm not super concerned about what AI is going to do, at least so far, because humans are better at a lot of things. But yeah, Seeds allows you to redeem a single seed, a single unit of the Seeds cryptocurrency, to ask for help, as many of you know. I think what's novel about that is that with these other tools, like DeFi is super fucking cool, I think, and everything, but you still need capital in order to benefit from it. You can't use it if you don't have money. Seeds, I think, improves upon that in that you can use a single seed. Currently, they're like 3.2 cents or something, I think, on the market. You can use a single seed to ask for help to get capital. And that's moving in a better direction, I think, away from something that's so problematic about late stage capitalism, which is that the wealth builds and there's generational wealth. And if you don't have wealth, you have to trade your time to get money. You can be trapped in subsistence styles of living for generations, and that's messed up. So Seeds is working to improve that. So you can go to our website and use Seeds to ask for help, which I know several of you here have done before in the past, and redeem that single seed to ask for help and just say how much you want the seed to be worth, essentially. You can say, I need $1,000 for my art project. And in doing so, of course, the community has to agree with that. Essentially, they have to provide that $1,000. But in doing so, you're essentially stating like your one seed is worth $1,000. And I think there's something interesting about that, because it's like we're personalizing the value of a unit of the currency when we're using seeds. And no other project I've seen is doing anything remotely like that. And it feels like it's on trend with other moves toward personalization that I think we're kind of seeing out in the world. The other piece of this that's very practical is that this design can help you avoid something that I personally was forced to do, which was that I had to sell all my Bitcoin in January of 2014. So it was still a really good trade in that it was like, I forget, I started buying in like late September, October of 2013. That was another cycle. That was when things were really going up a ton at the end of the year, and they peaked in January of 2014. It probably was like probably the best trade, not only cryptocurrency trade I've ever done, in that I was able to get out near the highs, which is virtually impossible. It's like, it's very difficult to do that, and it often requires some luck. But the fact is, I had to sell the Bitcoin that I owned in January of 2014 because I had to pay other bills. And I was fortunate that I had that available. But if I hadn't have had to sell it, then it would be pretty cool to still have that Bitcoin and have, you know, enough money to buy a nice ass house somewhere or whatever, right? So part of the idea behind the Seeds design is to prevent other people, to prevent you from having to do something like this, from having to sell to go into your savings or whatever, because that has huge, what's the word I'm looking for? Starts with an O. It has huge costs down the line, because I think particularly in the world of cryptocurrency, if it's a good quality project, it could go up a ton in a matter of a few years. And if you're selling it, then like you could be missing out on those huge profits. So Seeds is working to help you not have to do that. And those who give towards your need sees cryptocurrency in thanks. So like if I gave $25 towards your need, I get $25 worth of Seeds and thanks at the current market price at the time I gave. And the reason for this is because we want the giving people to be the ones to benefit when the market goes up, instead of the same people who aren't even thinking about giving at all as they're trying to build abundance themselves. Okay, here's some general crypto advice to finish things up. I'd say the number one mistake I see new cryptocurrency traders make, which is arguable, there are a handful, which I cover in our course, but one I see frequently is just this idea of waiting too long to get involved and then tending to quote unquote panic sell when things start coming down. That's typically a time, if it's a good quality project and you still believe in the project, those moments are the opportunities to buy more, or at least to hold. And this is it's a simple concept, you know, buy low, sell high. But in practice, it's one of the most difficult things to learn, I think, as a trader. That's what I've found. And it's interesting too, because we've been doing these courses for a few years now, or more than a few, I guess at least 4 years. And so that's been a full cryptocurrency cycle. And whenever the market is up, it's so much easier to find people who are interested in taking the cryptocurrency and how to trade it course. And when the market's down, there's way less interest. And it's such a bummer, because like if you're getting involved when the market is down, that's probably going to help you out more long term. I mean, like history has shown that over and over and over. So right now, because the market is down, it's probably a good time to prepare. But because of the way markets work, you know, people will be unsure and they might not want to get involved when it looks less certain. But a lot of times by the time, you know, like it's for sure going, you're quote unquote too late. You've already missed a lot of the potential profits in the move. So yeah, it's hard to do. It's so hard to do. But if you what you can do is try and find projects that you believe in, that you think are good quality, and get involved when they're cheaper, and then sort of wait for that catalyzing event that drives the market up, which I think is coming soon, which I'll talk more about. I've shared this before. This is an old picture from the cryptocurrency subreddit. So this is a couple cycles ago, I think, when cryptocurrency was much lower in value, but this person posts a picture of their Honda Civic and talks about how they used all their Bitcoin to buy this Civic in 2013, which is awesome. And the person says this could easily have been 10 plus Lamborghinis today. And it would be even more now because this post is old. I'm slightly disappointed in my life choices. Today I have zero. Don't be me. So that's the other thing. And I mean, this person, like, I want to give them a break because Bitcoin was first. It's the oldest cryptocurrency. So like nobody really knew that it would go as crazy as it did. I'm sure it seemed like a really good decision to sell your cryptocurrency, to sell your Bitcoin for a car when it was at, like $200 or whatever in 2013. But yeah, now that we've seen that that can happen, we can use that knowledge to try and like make more advantageous decisions for ourselves when looking at other, hopefully good quality cryptocurrency projects today. Toward that end, it can be very profitable to get involved in good projects when the crypto is quote unquote cheap. It's also, it makes you money if you stake in DeFi, almost without exception. You're going to earn fees and hold your cryptocurrency. I think it's generally good advice depending on what the cryptocurrency is and whether you believe in the project long term. I think it's also a good, not even a rule of thumb, it's virtually always a good idea to stake until the moment you're planning to sell the cryptocurrency. So if you just have cryptocurrency chilling in a wallet, that's cool that you have some, but it's sort of like hiding your cash under the mattress or something like that. You might as well stake it in DeFi to put it to work so that you're earning fees. And then it can unlock other things too, like airdrops, for example. So this was an airdrop that happened last year. I'm including it because it came up during the course that we did previously, the cryptocurrency and how to trade it course. So without getting too technical, Optimism is a layer 2 network built on top of Ethereum, built to work with Ethereum to reduce gas fees. So I started using Optimism in one of our courses, and I was just like doing different experiments and like sharing what I was learning with our students in the course. And I shared that I figured that there was a likelihood that Optimism would probably have a surprise airdrop at some point for those who would use their tool. And they did eventually have that in 2022 last year. So it was cool because simply because I used their protocol, they gave me, you can see here, this was like a snapshot of the wallet I was using. So they gave me 2,469 OP, their cryptocurrency. And in airdrops, they just give it to you. You just receive it sometimes directly to your wallet. Sometimes you have to claim it from a site. And then Optimism was suddenly trading on Coinbase. And at this time, it was trading at $2.19. So that was totally free money. So yeah, $2.19 times 2,469 OP was like $5,400 in free money. And that was from one airdrop alone. Airdrops are less common today than they used to be years ago. Some of y'all I know benefited from this crazy Uniswap airdrop that they had in late 2020. I mean, I was like kicking myself because of the way I handled that, because they had free Uni for every wallet that had ever interacted with Uniswap, even if your transaction failed. And we had a lot of wallets that had interacted with Uniswap. And I personally, if I played it better, like I had cryptocurrency just sitting in a wallet that I hadn't staked for no reason. I just hadn't done it. And if I'd staked all that, like I could have bought like a nice house in a major American city. Kimberly still has some of your free Uni. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, the other thing that was weird about Uni though is like a lot of times airdrops will just like spike and then crash. But Uni just kept going up for like a long time. It's back down lately. I haven't looked at the price in like the last couple months, but yeah, like I think that had to do with some of the investors who were behind the project, because there's some fancy venture capitalists behind Uniswap. But yeah, so that happened. So the point though is that when you stake, when you're using these platforms, these decentralized platforms, free money can come in through airdrops. So you can get these surprise benefits in addition to the fees that you can earn. Another general crypto piece of advice is that you can play the news to make profitable trades when cryptocurrencies are cheap. Is typically when that's a better idea to try this, because there's more upside. And you can do this even when the market isn't really doing anything, which has kind of been the case basically for the last arguably 2-ish years, year and a half or so. So I'm including this example because this was something else that came up in a recent course. I was talking about XRP, if you're familiar with that cryptocurrency. I've never personally liked XRP. Like, I don't like their mission doesn't like get me excited about the future of the world or anything. I think they're kind of like the corporate cryptocurrency, but they're pretty old. They've been around, I think, since, I want to say even since like 2013 or something like that. The project itself at least existed for a good amount of time. And many of you are aware that they were embroiled in this years-long lawsuit where the SEC in the United States was going after them. And it was weird. Like the SEC wasn't clear about like what was the rule, what rules were being broken. As much as I don't love XRP, the way the SEC handled it seemed to have tenets of fascism. It really seemed to have like, it was like they were regulating through litigation. So my thinking, which I shared in our course, was that like, I'm going to get some XRP now. The price is down because they're in this lawsuit. We don't know if they're going to win, but I think they might win because it seems like there isn't a real reason that they should have been sued. So I got some XRP when it was cheaper. And then when they won the lawsuit, and this was just announced pretty recently, what, in the last like 6 weeks or something, the price went up a lot. So then it became a newsworthy trade. The news moved the market enough to make profits. So like, that's another example of the type of trade we can look at in the course. And you can find these even when the cryptocurrency market isn't going crazy. Opportunities like this still exist. So now here's this part that I'm uncomfortable with, but I'll just say it because this is what sustains our project, so we can help people in need. If you'd like to work together further, you're welcome to join our course, Cryptocurrency and How to Trade It. This will be the only one we're offering in 2023, and it's kicking off on September 26th. So 3 weeks from today. Course tuition is $19.99 USD, but that includes $19.99 worth of seeds at market price at the time of your purchase. So that makes the course effectively free when you pay in full. There's a monthly payment option as well. That ends up being slightly more expensive, but you still get the $19.99 worth of seeds. And yeah, so past performance doesn't predict future results, et cetera, but that can mean that just by joining the course, if seeds go up in value over time, then you'll have more than $1,999 if the seeds go up. So there's that. Yeah, so that's in here. Yeah, and I'm so uncomfortable with these, but this is true. So this is like an ideal scenario, but if you'd joined the course in early 2020, when seeds were at their low at that time, which was like 0.0006 cents. Thank you. You would have gotten over 3 million seeds. At the current price, which is low, they're trading just over 3 cents as of yesterday. Then that value would be 106,000, almost 107,000 today, which is like a 53x return. Thank you, Kimberly. You're really sweet. Aaron's asking if past students will get the invite link this time around. Yep. Yeah. Past students are always welcome to join future versions of the course at no cost. We'll just send what we've done in the past. I think, Aaron, you've probably seen it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you have it. We sent like an email to like register your interest, and then people who signed up there, we would include on all the emails to let you know when those sessions were happening. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, it'd be really fun if you felt like joining again. Yeah, and that's the thing too, is that I'll say this later, but yeah, it can be a way to like stay in touch with what's going on, at least from my perspective as someone who's looking at the markets with regularity, because things can change so fast. They've changed a crazy amount, as y'all know, in like the last 6 months, really. Yeah, so it's interesting, I think, and this can be a way to keep updated and continue that discussion over time if you're interested in that. So yeah, with airdrops and fees, it can be a lot of value if you're just kind of taking these simple steps in joining the course simply because you get the $2,000 worth of seeds with when you join. And that doesn't include, other trades that you can make that can also be profitable. And the liquidity has to be there in the market, of course. Like the market for seeds has to be large enough to support those size trades. The market's still small, but the numbers are real. So Again, this is just my assessment. Never listen to me unless what I'm saying resonates with you, of course. Never listen to anyone unless that's the case. But for what it's worth, my sense is that we may be at the rough equivalent of 2020 lows, which was like the last cycle. The lows were in like March of 2020, and then things started to come up. But we still haven't had that catalyzing event that starts driving the market back upward. So it's important and helpful, I think, to know that the Bitcoin halving has historically always provided this. It's always without fail. I mean, there've only been 4-ish, I think, so far. Is that right? Maybe there've been 5 Bitcoin halvings. And what that means is that the reward for mining Bitcoin is cut in half when a certain block is mined. So they're estimating that this should happen roughly April of next year, April 2024. So, I mean, if history, again, that doesn't guarantee anything, but there is a likelihood for that reason that the Bitcoin halving could once again be a catalyst for upward movement in the market. So preparing for that time as best you can, I think, could be beneficial. Past students are welcome to join any future version of the course at no cost. It can help you stay informed. Yeah, and in my opinion, most importantly, in joining the course, you're supporting our work so that we can ensure that 100% of the value of gifts that come through the Seeds ecosystem, minus third-party transaction fees, go to people who are in need. The course is what sustains us so that we can do this. So, like, we're not a nonprofit. I chose to make us a D Corp because I thought that would make it easier for us to bring in funds from investors to like make the project exist. I might need to revisit that decision soon, but it's because that weird binary again, like Seeds isn't for profit or nonprofit or whatever. There's like no place for us, kind of. But anyway, that said, so we do the course to sustain the project. We might not need to do the course forever because at a certain point, the market, I think, should sustain Seeds as it is. But I also like doing it. It's fun and it's get to spend time with y'all. So like, I enjoy it. So anyway, at this point, I have a commitment to do at least one course per year. So this is our course for 2023. Yeah, so you'll be supporting this work, and it means a lot to us. It's really appreciated. So yeah, I threw this image in again just to emphasize this idea. I struggle with this so much because like everything sounds salesy. Capitalism makes it seem that way. Like people are always trying to sell their shit and whatever. And like I'm hopeful that you'll want to join the course and you'll see the value in that. And even more than that, I'm hopeful that good giving people like you won't miss out on the potential in these sectors, because I think it's a thing for our lifetimes. It's new technology. Bitcoin's almost 15 years old, relatively new. We've seen huge movements. I want it to be the giving people who benefit from this, not the same people who are already like dominating the legacy system. So that's a big part of the mission of what this is working to do. So yeah, like I said, it kicks off 26th. I have a button if you'd like to learn more that I can show you. So there's a button underneath. And gifts to those in need are always appreciated as well. And anyone who missed it, when you help someone in need through Seeds, we'll send you Seeds cryptocurrency and thanks. So that's an option too. That's very appreciated. Yeah, so if this resonates, we'd love to have you with us. And that's it. Q&A. All right. So I'm hopping into the question tab on the right. No questions have been submitted. So cool, I guess. Does anyone have anything else you wanted to ask? We'll check the chat again as well. Yeah, it looks like there's no questions. Is there anything else y'all wanted to touch on before we go? It's 12 o'clock Eastern time right now. Nah? Okay. Well, that's all I've got today then. Yeah. If you want to join, it should be fun. If you're a past student, we'd love to have you again. I don't know if you saw it in any of the emails that have gone out recently, but we'll send that email to register your interest this week. So keep an eye out for that. Yeah. And if you want to do this, I think there's a likelihood that it'll be beneficial to you and it'll definitely help people in need as well. And hopefully it'll be fun. I enjoy doing them. I would love to have you. All right, y'all. I guess I'll let you go. Thank you so much again for spending time today. Yay! Kimberly's like, awesome. Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing too that's weird about it. Like, because it goes through cycles. So there are periods where like I think it makes sense to be less active. At least that's what I've been telling myself when I've struggled to figure out how to speak about seeds recently. Like I was using TikTok a lot and then I kind of stopped because it just seemed like there was so much crypto hate that I couldn't like get a message through. Yeah. But yeah, I think now, as I touched on, like I think we're starting to come into a period where becoming more active again is probably going to help us. So there's that. Yeah. Mayam says, wonderful. I got all the information I need. Great. Mayam's here. He's in South Sudan, which is awesome. Willie says, explain staking rewards again. Okay. So when you stake, you are essentially allowing a DeFi platform like Uniswap to use your liquidity so that traders can make trades. So when we're using a platform like Gemini, that's a centralized exchange, like I didn't mention this earlier in this webcast, but those guys put up their money themselves initially so that there was enough liquidity so we could make trades, because like obviously you can't trade if if there isn't enough of a cryptocurrency there to trade. You can't make a trade. You can't make a trade if there's not enough of anything you want to buy or sell, right? So in the past with centralized exchanges, the benefit that those people brought is that they had money, so they could put up a bunch of money so there was enough liquidity to make trades. The solution that decentralized platforms like Uniswap found, and Uniswap really pioneered this, like people couldn't figure this out for years. There were other attempts from platforms like Ether Delta that couldn't figure this out. Uniswap realized that instead of relying on like a couple rich white guys, we could all come together on a decentralized platform, use our self-custody wallet so we still retain control of our funds and custody of our money, and just essentially like store our funds on the decentralized platform. So that way there'd be enough liquidity for traders to make those trades. And then the traders would pay fees that would come to us instead of to a couple rich white guys or whatever. So yeah, when you're staking, you're retaining custody of your money. You can remove it at any time. And you're generating fees that traders are paying as they're making their trades. And like if you're staking something like seeds, which many of y'all I know have done, which is appreciated, you can also, airdrops were mentioned, so you might get free money from an airdrop. You can collect fees as mentioned, although the volume in the seeds pool is still small, so you're not going to make a lot in fees probably so far. But in the future, hopefully that'll be the case. And then the other thing is that seeds gives like generous bonuses for staking, which is maybe what you're asking about, Willie. But yeah, when you stake, we have different rewards tiers every year. Let me give this to you. It's like the first question in the FAQ. So you can check this out to see like what the parameters are for this year. But yeah, we've tried to keep these generous to like benefit our early supporters. So you can do this and stake, and then we'll also send you an award for staking at the beginning of next year as well. So it's like another way to make money through helping people. Right on. Does that clarify things for you, Willie? Or do you want me to like expand on any piece of that or anything? I'll take that as a no. All right, y'all. Thank you again. I appreciate you. Willie says my course fees are worth at least 20x what I paid. That's awesome. Yeah, and the market's down right now, as we talked about. So like hopefully when the market goes back up, that'll be way more than 20x. Not good, but we'll see. No guarantees, etc. But yeah, it really can be beneficial, I think, especially if you're getting in when the market's down, which Willie did. I think, Willie, you got in like right before that last run or around that time, I think. Yeah. Yeah. All right, y'all, I'll let you go. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day. Yeah, hopefully I'll catch you somewhere soon.